Just so you know, I can't walk and stand still at the same time, so you're going to have to bear with me. Susan stands up here because she's about this tall, and it's better for her to be seen. I might come down to the floor. I think that I'm down on the floor, you can still see me. A few years ago, I was in a Sunday school class, and a question came up for discussion in the Sunday school class. Is the world worse today than it's ever been? So the next question was, well, what's worse? Define worse. More wicked, more evil, more violent, nastier, meaner, people uglier to each other, not physically ugly, than it's ever been. And there was a pause, and finally someone spoke up and said, yes, today the world is the worst that it's ever been. It's a wicked, nasty, evil, horrible place. And very quickly there was a chorus of, here, yeah, we agree. I'm sitting over there and I'm thinking to myself, if you think the world is nastier today than it's ever been, I got 2 words for you. Roman Colosseum. We don't pay, 50,000 people don't pay and go watch other people get slaughtered. We think the NFL is bad? The crowds were cheering and chanting for bloodshed. Or I'll give you another example. Let's go back to Genesis. Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible tells us that in Sodom and Gomorrah there were gangs of men roaming the streets of the town, and when they found out a stranger was in the town, they demanded that that stranger be thrown out so they could rape him. Now, I know that there are gangs today, but I have not seen a group of men standing outside the Wyndham Hotel wanting all visitors to the city of Springfield to be thrown out into the streets so they could be raped. I'm sure that's comforting to all of our guests. Or let's roll forward a little bit. In the 1300s, there was an Asian ruler. His name was Tamir, also called Tamerlane. His goal was to restore the empire of Genghis Khan, so he set out across Asia with his army, and by the time he was done, it is estimated that he killed 17 million people. And at that time, it's also estimated that that was 5% of the world's population. In one instance, his soldiers vanquished a city that was over 100,000 people. And at the end, when they were finished, they built towers. They built 28 towers. Each tower was constructed of 1,500 heads. Now, wait a second, though. Don't we tell our kids the same story? Don't we tell our kids about Joshua? And how Joshua went into the promised land with orders to conquer the cities and do what? Kill every man, woman, child, sheep, cow, dog, cat. It's kind of the same story. The reason that I bring that up is the first passage that I read tells us that because of us, because of mankind, evil is in the world. And I don't think it's worthwhile to sit around and have a discussion about whether the world is more evil today than it was yesterday. It's always been evil. And because mankind live in the world, it will always be evil. We are surrounded, going back to that topic, by this crushing weight of stuff that tears us away from what's important to us. Fortunately, as I mentioned before, the answer is in the Bible, and Jesus gave us the answer, and he did it in an illustration. And I want to tell you that story today, but interestingly enough, there's 2 stories that are linked together, so it actually starts with the feeding of the 5,000. The feeding of the 5,000 is the only miracle that's mentioned in all 4 Gospels, and they vary slightly. I'm going to use the one from Matthew. There are so many incredible things about this story, and again, I'm using it to lead me up to the second part of the story. The first thing is that Jesus was seen And what happened? What happened when somebody saw Jesus? They ran and told everybody else. And did you catch that in the first couple of verses? It says that the crowd did what? Ran to see Jesus. Now, I like to come to church. I drive to church, but I don't usually run for miles to get to church. Once they were there, what did they do? They stayed all day. They didn't eat lunch, and by the time it got to the evening, they still didn't want to go. I think that there were some Puritan churches in the early U.S. where they went to church all day on Sunday. We've obviously gotten out of that habit. But can you imagine being so enraptured by Jesus' words that you didn't stop for lunch? And you didn't want to stop for dinner. But the disciples came to Jesus and said, these people have to be fed. They're going to faint on their way back because some of them have come a long way. So Jesus baited his disciples a little bit to teach them a lesson. You feed them. We can't. We don't have the means to feed them. It would take half a year's wages just for everybody to have a crumb. And Jesus said, well, what have you got? And they said, well, we found a boy that's got some barley loaves and some fish. And Jesus said, okay, put it into baskets. Break it up and put it into baskets. And they did. They broke it up, put it into baskets, handed it out to the people, and everybody ate their fill. There's another story in the Old Testament that's very similar, with the woman that had the flour and the oil. And the flour never ran out. And the oil never ran out. In this case, the food never ran out. In the Matthew version, it's a little different than the other versions because it says, when this happened, what did the crowd do? They were amazed. They said, this is a prophet, and they were going to do what? They were going to make Jesus king by force. Why would that be? Are you kidding? He fed them. If we make this guy king, we're never going to go hungry again. Now, I'm going to pick on our college choir scholars here a little bit. I think it's difficult for them to grasp a world where food was hard to get. And getting food was a lot of work. Obviously, in this country today and in other countries, I think our Canadian friends are behind, but not that far behind. We have too much food, and there are obesity problems. That's our number one health problem, is obesity problems. Because back then, if you wanted to have a piece of bread, you had to plant the wheat. Then you had to reap the wheat. Then you had to separate the chaff. Then you had to grind it into flour. Then you had to walk to where the water is to get the water to come back. Then you had to squeeze the olives to get the oil. Well, first of all, you had to pick the olives, you had to get the pits out, then you had to squeeze it to get the oil. Just to make a piece of bread. And Jesus all of a sudden is feeding people with nothing. Heck yes, we want to make this guy king. And they were willing to charge into Jerusalem and face the Roman army at any cost to make it happen. So the Bible tells us that Jesus withdrew himself and sent the disciples off to get away from the crowd before they could do something stupid. The disciples get into the boat. They take off across the lake. Jesus basically hides from the crowd. And then when the crowd has gone away, he tries to reconnect with the disciples. The Bible tells us that a storm has come up. Now we're moving into the second part of the story. The Bible tells us that a storm has come up and the disciples are out on a boat. Well, some are fishermen, used to being in a boat. But back then it probably wasn't a big boat. I have been on the water twice in storms, once when I was a small child and once recently on a cruise. It was a nasty storm, but I'm telling you, when you're on one of those big boats, you just don't really feel it as much. Now, the time when I was a child, It was terrifying. I'm a strong swimmer, but I can tell you that being out a couple miles from shore in a storm, in a small boat, is not the place you want to be. It's better to be on the shore wishing you were on the water than on the water wishing you were on the shore. When you read the accounts, it seems that it was more than just a little bit of wind that the disciples were rowing against. It was some sort of a storm. And they were probably very busy, very occupied, trying to keep their boat above the water, keep themselves in the boat, and try to make it to where they expected to meet Jesus. The Bible tells us that Jesus walked out across the water. Now, why would Jesus walk out across the water in a storm to get to the disciples? And I think the reason is it was a teaching moment. Just like the feeding of the 5,000 was a teaching moment, you feed them, Jesus said to the disciples. This was a teaching moment. The disciples are already scared. They're busy. They're terrified. Their adrenaline's up. They're agitated, working hard to keep the boat afloat. And they see a guy on the water. It's not even something that you would think about. And I don't know about you, but if I was in the middle of a storm and I see a figure walking towards me across the top of the water, I'm already scared. Now I'm going to be absolutely terrified. And they thought it was a ghost. They thought they were being haunted or that some demon spirit was coming to finish them off. And they screamed and they said, "It's a ghost." Jesus said, wait. Sorry to scare you guys. Didn't mean to, but I'm not a ghost. It's me. And here's the teaching moment. Peter said, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you." Jesus said, "Come." Something happened right there to Peter. And we've all had similar things like this happen in our lives where we're focused on something to such a degree that it seems like we don't hear anything, we don't smell anything, we don't feel anything. All we can see is what we're focused on. Have you ever had that moment? Peter is looking at Jesus' face, and the only thing that he sees is Jesus Christ. And he jumps out of the boat because he is not even aware of anything else. The wind, the noise of the wind, the splash of the waves. Maybe there was thunder, maybe there was lightning, maybe there was rain. None of it mattered. And he jumped out of the boat and walked across the water. Now, I wasn't there, but I almost can guarantee I know what happened. Peter's got his eyes on Jesus, and he's walking across the water, and he doesn't even realize it because what's he doing? He's focused on Jesus. And somewhere along the line, maybe it was the wind, maybe it was the waves, maybe a bolt of lightning came down right next to him, and Peter did this. He sang. And that's all it took. We live in a world where everything around us is trying to make us do this. We're supposed to focus on Christ. We're supposed to be the embodiment of Christ in this world. And we can't do that if we let all of this noise make us go like this. I'm not saying that we should ignore it, but we can't let it distract us. We need to be in the world. We need to be participating in the world so the world can see Christ through us, but we can't let all of this stuff take our focus from where it needs to be. We have the answer. And we're supposed to share that answer with others.